welcome to this week's edition of the Story Podcast. We are going to talk about the foundation of our faith, Jesus' resurrection. We're so glad you're with us.
He is risen.
He is risen indeed. Well, hey, Steve, good to be with you to talk about the resurrection. You know, I was real proud of the First Baptist family because we both threw out a He is risen, and they were right on it. They were right on it.
Those are not just the Easter only Christians.
Those are not the Easter only.
They come to Easter even in October.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, because that would have thrown me off. But anyways, well, hey, it was great to talk about the resurrection. We both mentioned it's just really the foundation of our faith and why we have the hope that we have. Let's talk about what you talked about and kind of the scripture. But before we even get to that, I kind of want to just take a few minutes and, this is dangerous, delve into the mind of the preacher. And so clear it out. So you preached on Easter, a lot, the resurrection, a lot of times.
Yeah.
A lot of times when it's like just resurrection, we do that only on Easter. Tell me about the joys and the struggles, if you will, or how do you approach preaching on the resurrection?
Both you and me know this
Yes.
instinctively. When I was early on, I remember I was a church planter and I was starting to preach regularly, and I would preach on Easter, and obviously it comes around every year.
Yes,
it's the same topic, and
right.
It's again and again. In fact, one of my prime memories was a guy who had become the lead pastor of our mother church, big church up in Elk Grove, and we ran into each other on campus. I was going back to my office on his campus, and he was like, "Easter, it was great, yada yada yada," and he was like, "You got to do this every year," and I'm like, "You are a rookie, man. You got to do this every year." So I'm sure one of the things that's sort of interesting about it is that in a lot of ways, we're always looking for like an angle.
A new twist.
Yeah, an angle or something on it, which it doesn't need it, but we are always trying to keep it fresh. Maybe it's for our people, maybe it's just for us as preachers or whatever.
Yeah.
But the other piece that's interesting to me, which I don't think regular people know, is like Easter's like, your kids have said it, Dad, it's a Super Bowl.
My kids always tease me, Dad, it's Super Bowl, you ready?
Everybody's going to be there, right? And
Yeah.
it's big attendance, and you really do feel an added burden of like pressure because
Right.
you want to present the resurrection story in such a way that people engage it and like have to decide, do I believe this or don't I? And so that week leading up to it, I felt that same like, oh my gosh, it's Easter pressure.
Yeah.
And obviously it was October and we're in the middle of the story, and so it wasn't really that, but this is the hinge point of our faith. If this isn't true, none of it's true. And so there's a layer of wanting to present that well and do it in such a way that it engages people.
Yeah. It's always tricky to me too, because I'm the same way, and you want to be creative, and yet you think this is the same story for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And there's a certain temptation that's probably wrong to add a new twist to the resurrection. There's no new twist to the resurrection.
No new twist.
And there shouldn't be. It's an ancient faith, and I always feel, I say this expression sometimes, it's like, because I find security in it, we take our place in the line of those that have talked about the resurrection for all these years.
Yeah.
And so to me it's really
millions of preachers over millennia have preached this story, and so we're one more voice to the timeless story. One of the things that's interesting, you talked about it, like there's no new angle, but there are like things that you realize when you're reading the story again. Everything from like mistaking Jesus for the gardener, or the women, the fact that women were the original like carriers of the gospel message, which they had no standing in that society at that time.
Powerful,
So there's all these things that you can link in on that are all true and have been true throughout the story. And even for me, if you were there on Sunday, I just noticed everybody's running. Every single time you turn around, there's somebody running to go tell someone else.
So I was going to ask you a little bit about that, because not that it was a new twist, but this idea of running, I thought it was great.
Well, the Peter and John,
it's classic.
The race, is the one thing that I think a lot of people know or whatever. But as you're thinking about some of these other places, Mary running back to tell the disciples, and of course, like I said, I can't prove that Cleopas and Bob were running,
they hustled back.
But it seems like it, when you read and it's like this idea of like, this is, if something this groundbreaking were to happen in our society, whatever it is, 9/11 or any of those things that are like, oh, this is an earth-shattering news story.
Yeah.
Well, we run through social media. We run through texting or calling
but
the
we
people
want to get it
we
out
love.
there.
But we're trying to get the information out as soon as we can because we know it's going to be like life-changing, altering.
Yeah.
When COVID hit, everybody's talking about there's a ticker on the screen. Like it's the prime piece of information that we're trying to share. And really, running was their avenue of doing that back then.
Yeah, they didn't have social media, but they were going to run and do it.
Nobody was texting.
But yeah, when you experience something big, you want to get the word out. And that was that.
Yeah.
So, and then you kind of talked about, I thought, just a great point about, as far as turning the corner, I want to get your words right. You said, we need a reason to run.
Yeah.
That was kind of the so what for you. Tell me a little bit about that.
So this idea that why, I use the story of how often do we run in our day and age. By the way, for those of you who...
Let's step out of the Bible story. Let's step out of the upper story, down to the lower story. It's Steele's Sunday.
Where Pastor Glen jinxed me.
I just told the truth.
We do this during 3 services, and right at the introduction at the second service, Pastor Glen said, boy, I hope he doesn't pull a hamstring. That'll make sense later. I fully pulled a hamstring second service and was paying for it. The rest of God gave me just enough to be able to run a couple more times.
You were moving though.
The funny thing is, and for anybody that, we have different styles, obviously a little bit. My style is always to get people engaged, have them, and something that they'll hopefully remember. But I'm hoping that as I tie it all together, what they really think is, oh, that was crazy the way you started running. But then he talked about running. And he talked about running again. He talked about running again. And in the so what, he said.
Saw it in the Bible.
And the question is like, why? When was the last time you ran? And why did you run? And the only time we ever run at this phase in our life, there's some people who do it for fun, crazy people. But we do it because sometimes it's life or death, or it's just so important that we've got to get there right then and then.
Yeah.
And so the words that I used when I was preaching was this idea of priority.
Urgency and priority.
Yeah, urgency and priority. And so I see that obviously so clearly in the Easter story. Urgency and priority for Mary, urgency and priority for Peter and John, urgency and priority for these guys that walked with Jesus on the Emmaus Road. And you see that, and they are desperate to tell people.
Right.
And I think, and I was sort of convicted, but I also shared it on Sunday, like that urgency and priority sometimes in our lives when we've been Christians for a long time, when we're surrounded by a bunch of Christians in our lives because those are the people that we spend a lot of time with, whether it's family, friends, or, in the church body, that urgency and priority can tend to fade away a little bit. And we've seen a resurgence. Right now, you and I know, we're watching it happen amongst some young people that are recognizing the urgency and priority of the gospel message, and they are running towards faith, running towards Jesus, running towards baptism, running towards these things and you and I are looking around like, what happened?
Yeah.
Like, what's happening right now?
Yeah, it's really exciting.
But it's exciting because we see that urgency and that priority that we had at one time and want it, and it fires us up to think people have it again, and we want to make us want to run too.
Yeah. Let's come back to that idea of how the resurrection fits into that revival spirit that we're seeing in our nation. But you said something that was really convicting. I mean, basically what you just explained was, sometimes we're start jogging in our faith, and even more than that, sometimes you see the people that are running, and you're like, oh, those guys are the fanatics.
Yeah.
Those are the crazy people.
Yeah, they are.
Well, sign me up for that. I want to be one of those guys.
Absolutely. And the guys that are posting on social media and they're just posting their spiritual content all the time, and I'm always like, I don't know how effective it is. Well, we know it is effective for some people, And it makes me want to lean into the environments in our world where we have an opportunity to reach lost people. And frankly, the longer you've been, the longer you've been a Christian, the more Christians are in your circle, around your life. And as a result, you just don't have that much interaction with lost or hurting people. And we need to find ways to insert ourselves into those situations. For a lot of, you and I are pastors, obviously we come to work and most of our staff is Christian. No, all of our staff.
I've been praying for Pastor Ian. Who might be in the room.
but we're surrounded by Christians. We're always networking with people who are servants or leaders in the church, and so we do a lot of that. But most people they go to work my wife
Right.
teaches at a school, and she's surrounded by
Yeah.
families and teachers and students and all the rest who are unbelievers or
Right.
marginal believers at best. And she gets a chance to interact with them. If you work wherever you work, at a car dealership, at a manufacturing plant, at a whatever you do, a lot of those people get a chance to interact with those people. But you know what we do way too often? We just don't bring it up.
Yeah, and we talk about it at our, in the four walls of the church, or in our church with our church friends, kind of thing. And to me, the flip side of that, not only do we miss that opportunity when we don't step out in faith, but when we let our faith become just me and my Bible friends and stuff like that, that's great, and fellowship is so important. But honestly, it's the beginning of the death of a church.
Yeah.
When it's all about us four and our little group, because then all of a sudden you get really picky about things, and you get really negative about things. And you know what happens when you're out there with your faith and you're inviting people in and you're not bringing people in? You don't have time for all of the other stuff because you're on mission. And I think we see that in the early church. And we're about to study Acts for the next few weeks.
It's all about Acts.
Yeah, they do not have, I guess they do have some times where they struggle through some stuff, but really it's about this mission. So
it's sort of that come versus go mentality, right? And at the end of this chapter, the resurrection chapter, it goes through Jesus, and he's cooking fish on the beach, and he gives the Great Commission, go therefore and make disciples. And we tend to have a come mentality. Come to church. You ever have somebody say this to you?
Yeah.
Hey, I brought my friend today. Don't mess
up. Yes, absolutely.
And you're like, yeah. But in some people's mind, this idea of come to church is the ultimate expression. And no, God has sent us and sent you very specifically to them. And you don't have to have the perfect words. You don't have to have but you do have to have some. What is First Peter talks about being ready.
A reason, which again doesn't have to be some big apologetic, but it has to be, man, this is what Jesus is doing.
Right, and it can be as simple as, why do you believe there's a God? Because when you look around at the natural world, there's no way this happened by accident.
Right.
There's no way that the interaction between carbon dioxide, plants that take in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen, and we breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon, like none of that makes sense without God. And that's Romans 1:20 for you and I. But then you talk about this guy Jesus, who no historian worth their salt would say that Jesus didn't walk the earth, that there was this guy, a historical figure in Jesus. And then you talk about the reasons for the resurrection, and you and I have both done like apologetics.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that, because I think the resurrection is so foundational for what kind of our reasons to believe. And the example I've used many times, sometimes I feel like it's, you're getting across, if you ever gone across a river and you have to hop from stone to stone to stone, some are kind of little, but when you land on the resurrection, you catch your breath there, because that's a firm, strong stone. So let's talk a little bit about, what has the resurrection meant to you as far as just the foundation of your faith? How do you talk to people about that?
First of all, it's a fantastic claim. Somebody died and came back from the dead.
Sure,
that's a fantastic claim. And so you can see why a lot of people struggle with that piece. It is supernatural, it is unprecedented, it is all of the rest of that. Right. So I can understand why they do that. However, a lot of people, when they get to, realistically, what I was preaching on this week is the reactions of people to the resurrection. And that's really probably the strongest defense for the resurrection. Why would a Roman soldier who's probably presided over hundreds of these crucifixions, at the end of Jesus' death on the cross, go, truly he was the Son of God. Why would, and realistically it's not just the women, not just the disciples, but all these other people are going to get sent out in Acts. Why would they go out and give their entire life to this thing if it was a lie? And literally, their life. Many of them were martyred. And all you have to do is say, you know what? I really didn't see him raising from the dead. And so there's all those I would call them psychological. There's no amount of, you wouldn't go to your death for a lie, is the way that it's been worded in the past. And that resonates with me. At some point, no matter how hard I've been holding on to this lie, if somebody puts a gun to my head and goes, I'm going to kill you unless you give up the lie,
I'm out.
I'm probably going to say I'm out. And these guys never did.
Right.
None
of them.
They had seen too much.
Mm-hmm.
There was no way they could deny what they had seen. And it's like, if you're going to kill me, but it's still the truth.
Yeah, yeah. You know, another kind of apologetic twist is almost what you were talking about with all of the running. The way that the story is put together, if they were making this stuff up, it would have been a little different. It wouldn't have been women at the tomb.
Yeah.
First of all, because their credibility wasn't valued in that society.
Culture.
So you would have had someone else, and you would have had this whole we ran and we were afraid and we didn't know what was going on.
Right.
What it reads like is people that were trying to figure this out then figured it out. It reads like a true story. And this is skipping ahead into next week, but then 50 days later. They're going to hear a sermon by Peter, and many of them were there, and 3,000 of them accept Jesus on that day.
Right. Yeah.
So there's
hard to ignore that.
Hard to ignore that.
Yeah.
Hard to ignore that.
The other thing that I've never really explored in the Easter story, maybe
What's
next
that?
Easter we'll do it, is Jesus teleporting everywhere.
I know.
Well,
Yeah.
what was that all about?
Yeah.
Like
He
he's
got
on
there
this
faster.
Emmaus road with these guys. He finally reveals his identity, and poof, he's gone. And then these guys run all the way back, and poof, he shows up in the room.
Yeah.
And so there's some of that you're like, and don't get me wrong, at this point the miracles have been flowing on Jesus.
Right.
He can do whatever he wants to do. But it's another fantastic story.
Yeah.
How do you make sense of it?
Yeah.
And yeah.
To me, there's a little bit of fun, a little bit of comedy to it. Jesus is like in the room, peace be with you.
Yeah, yeah. I don't feel a lot of peace right now, Jesus. Where'd you come from?
Yeah, his resurrection appearances, to Peter, and they're so good. To Thomas, the way he does that. So
well, and I love this Roman soldier at the foot of the cross says, surely he was the Son of God.
Right.
John walks in, sees, and believes.
Right.
He still hasn't seen Jesus.
Right.
There's a lot of people who come to this conclusion before they actually get a chance to. But God in his grace and mercy allows us to have Thomas, say, I'm not, I ain't believing anything until he not only walks in the room, but he lets me put in my, and so Jesus goes the extra mile for those who
needed that.
Are quick to faith, and for those who are slow to faith.
Yeah, thankful for that in my life.
Yeah, me too.
Hey, I don't know exactly how this ties in, but you've mentioned, and we've talked about, I think we were talking a little bit about, we had this young man who was baptized on Sunday, who told this great story of some people on his high school baseball team telling him about Jesus, and then he started watching some YouTube videos and talking to a few more people, and now he's just on fire for the Lord. And we see this among young people, especially young men, how does the resurrection fit into this movement of? To me, I think about people that are looking for something real. Yeah. Looking for something that's going to make a difference in my life. Yeah. Looking for something to build their life upon too.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people who are finding faith, specifically through Jesus right now, are looking for a sense of purpose in their lives, right? Mm-hmm. They're looking for something bigger than, I've said it this way to a lot of people, I'm not positive that, this is my view from the outside looking in, because I've been a long time Jesus follower, I haven't really walked away from it that much. But I think there's a lot of people that are looking at our world, they're seeing the divide, they're seeing, some of the pain and all kinds of things from, just the American dream isn't what it was, and people are anesthetizing themselves with clicking and scrolling and drugs and alcohol and all the rest, and they're just saying.
And some of the stuff just doesn't make sense too, whether it's gender and sexuality. It's all just
of that. Yeah, and they're anesthetizing themselves with anything they can come up with. Sex is is another one, or ideologies is another one. But at the end of the day, the question is if all of that's not satisfying. It's just not satisfying. And so as a result, they're saying there's got to be something more. Right. And they're looking for the God of the universe. But, if you go to look for the God of the universe, then you got to evaluate, is it Hindu's explanation? Is it all these different explanations that are out there? They're finding the God of the Bible. They're finding that to be the most satisfying explanation. Mm-hmm. And at some point, you got to come to grips with the resurrection if you're going to believe the God of the Bible. Yeah. If you're not going to believe that piece, then you can't believe any of it, I would say. Right. And I think they're having to stare at face, straight on, and they're coming to the conclusion that you and I have come to a long time ago, which is it's got to be true. None of this makes sense without the resurrection.
Yeah. As you know, there's a line of thinking out there in faith that's, the resurrection is just a
Happy
myth,
story.
or it's just a, it's a metaphor, and people are not finding that to be satisfying.
No.
That's just one more lie.
Yeah.
That's just one more lie.
Absolutely.
So we see the historicity of it. So,
Yeah.
the other thing that I think kind of ties into this, but I just wanted to ask you about it, is what are the daily implications of the resurrection? So you preach about it on Easter, you got this hope, but what does it mean for daily life? And I think that's something people are asking and looking for, like what difference does this make for me that Jesus is risen from the dead?
So the resurrection for me is a picture of new life.
Mm-hmm.
And, this idea of the atoning blood of Jesus, this blood that covered over the sins that we saw from the Israelites, right? The blood that was painted on the doorpost and caused the angel of death to fly over. There's a layer of our own lives that we know the sin that still resides in our hearts. Doesn't matter how long you've been following Jesus, doesn't matter if you went to grad school or seminary for this stuff, you know the darkness that's in your own heart, and you know the sin that ekes its way out in lots of different situations. And the truth of the resurrection is Jesus continually, or God continually offers through Jesus, a new version of yourself.
Yeah.
That blood is still powerful enough to cover over whatever you're dealing with right now. That your life in Christ is not something that has to be earned daily.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, a life of discipleship is required, afterwards, but it's not earned in that way.
Right.
And so the blood of Jesus covers over even my sins from yesterday, even my sins from today, and my sins from tomorrow. You don't ever want to get complacent in that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still just as powerful.
Right.
And that offer of new life that is, so clearly pictured in the resurrection is offered to us again too.
Yeah.
Somebody's calling me.
Yeah. And when you really get that creates that urgency and priority that you were
Right.
talking about to run to Him. Yes, and I also just think of the promises that the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead can be alive in us.
Alive in us.
So how hopeful that is. And just that concept, when you talk about new life, I think of so many of us that are facing hard situations or places where it feels like, oh, that dream is dead, or that hope is dead, or that future is dead. And God specializes in bringing dead things back to life.
He does. He does.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even the way you worded that, I love the way you worded that, because it's like, not only does the blood of Christ cover over my sins, not only am I promised a new life day in and day out, but I'm also promised in this moment, that same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead is alive in me, and it will allow me to overcome temptation.
Right.
It will allow me to have hope in what is a hopeless situation sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Just one other thing, and this is maybe a little bit more obvious one, but I know both you and I do a number of funerals, deal with people. I think you have a funeral this week.
Yes.
How's the resurrection play into what you're gonna share at this week's funeral?
Well, I always talk about, it's funny, this, I don't want to go too far into it for the people who are there, but funerals fall into a few categories, right? Mm-hmm. There's funerals that we do. I know you will understand this. There's funerals that we do for people who are genuinely like saints of the faith. Yeah. And we're like, we love those. Yeah, they're easy. They are the easiest funerals to do, because you're like, this person lived a godly life. I watched their faith on display. There is no doubt in my mind that they are marching into heaven with open arms, Jesus saying, well done, good and faithful servant. There's those that we don't know that well. We get asked to do funerals all the time. And there's some times where you're asking people about their faith journey and you're like, I'm not sure about that, And so there's a layer of like that you want to be comforting, you want to honor the person, all that, but you got an opportunity to share the gospel message.
Yeah.
And frankly, if you're coming to me and you want me to do it, I'm going to tell you about Jesus. I'm going to tell you about the promise of heaven. That promise of heaven, the kingdom of heaven, was paid for. Mm-hmm. At the resurrection, that's where it was paid for. You got a ticket because he punched that ticket that day. And so there's a layer of that, and so I'm always trying to paint that hope, but it's all in light of the resurrection. Yeah. Because without the resurrection, there is no hope.
Nice. Yeah. So what you're saying to me is The promise of eternal life is based on the resurrection.
Yeah.
The promise of new life in this world is based on the resurrection.
Absolutely.
You know, that's priority and urgency. We got to run to that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we got to run to that.
And we need to live it out daily. Like I made the comment that some of us are jogging at some point.
Right.
And we all have seasons where we jog. If you've ever run a long race,
by the way, nice job on the half marathon.
Yeah, it's been a while ago now. I ain't doing another one. But there's a layer of like you all pace yourselves, and there's times where you jog a little bit, but sometimes we need to be called out of jogging. And we need to be like, hey, step it up. Somebody's trying to pass you, or whatever. That doesn't translate, but there's a reason to run in certain places. When you see the finish line, you giddy up a little bit, and I hope for me, in this life, when I'm nearing that finish line with Christ, that I'm going to giddy up a little bit.
Yeah.
But there are times along the way where you're like, you know what? I need to pick up the pace. There's people I love. There's people who are lost. I'm watching a revival, which we sort of are right now, and it's like that means pick up the pace because there's a lot of people to reach right now.
A lot of people to reach. So great. Good. Well, hey, appreciate it. Anything else? So next week
No, I'm excited about Acts. Obviously, you're going to dive. We talk about this a lot. There's a lot in each of these chapters. Like we're covering whole books of the Bible. We're covering how much of the resurrection story is in the Gospels? Like it's chapters upon chapters and various viewpoints of it. But Acts is this story of really the early church beginning. Then they're running. Yeah. Front end, they are running.
They are running.
Running towards missionary journeys and running towards lost people in the streets and
building the church.
Absolutely. And healing and all kinds of things that they're doing. They are running. Yeah. Just like Forrest Gump.
Well,
I was running.
Well, hey, thank you for joining us this week. I hope that's encouraging to you. And, if you're in one of those seasons where you find yourself either limping along, know that God runs to you. But also, if you find yourself a little complacent and jogging, let's pick up the pace. Let's run together and encourage one another. So God bless you. Thanks for being here. Hey, feel free to comment to us. Let us know how we can help you or engage on this material in any way. We got just a few weeks left in the story of the Bible, and we're coming to the end, but it's been a great journey together. God bless you. Thanks for being here today, and we'll see you really soon.